It felt like each brushstroke I put down was a risk. Time was running out and I had to pick up the pace. After 2 hours, I wasn't too proud of this piece, but it marked the beginning of the 30-day process. Second day, I realized that my habit of zooming in to add details was counterproductive. As artists, we love to get caught up in the small details, but I had a 2-hour time limit to follow. The 2-hour mark came way earlier than expected, and although the painting felt incomplete, I was learning on which parts of a portrait to prioritize on. Day 3, I wanted to implement what I've learned from previous days. It was a slow start, but I tried not to get lost in details. You can see how much I simplified this clothing a lot with big brushstrokes. It was more finished than the last 2 portraits, and I was happy with how believable the clothing looked. 4th day, and I found a heavenly reference. You're probably noticing that my art is very stylized, a style which was very heavily influenced by this one small artist. Despite trying my hardest to not zoom in, the painting still took 2.5 hours. I was happy I at least finished it, even if it wasn't within 2 hours. We are officially a 1/6 of the way through the challenge. I tried a fast and loose approach, and once I got into the flow, I couldn't stop. I was unstoppable. It wasn't even 2 hours in, and I was already really satisfied with how it turned out. I was amazed at how different my 5th portrait was to my first one. I was basically the next Da Vinci. Throughout this challenge, I constantly kept stepping out of my comfort zone. This one had hands. I thought I was scared of hands, but it wasn't those hands that made me struggle. It was actually the lips. As you can see, I struggled a lot. She almost looked like she was talking to me. The painting took 3 hours, and I was happy with how well I portrayed the lighting scenario. For the next portrait, I tried to apply everything I learned in the last week. I used my sketching time wisely to leave enough time for rendering. The detailed hair in this portrait, it took a while, but I knew I needed to speed it up for the next portraits. 8 days in, and I struggled to balance the daily portraits with work, life, and friends and family. After returning home from work at midnight, I would start my next portrait. Sometimes I'd stay up until 6 AM to finish them. I was really determined to not skip a day here, and some people called me crazy for it. But for day 9, I lost track of time here, giving in to the perfectionist within me. While it's good to strive for the best, I knew I needed to let go of perfection to save time for future portraits. This portrait ended up taking 4 hours to complete, so they're getting longer. My sister asked me to draw her on day 10. Yeah, this is what she looks like, but I made her look better in the painting because I'm such a good brother. I took away the time limit for this piece though, since it was a special occasion celebrating 1/3 of the challenge's completion. From here on, I committed to completing a portrait daily, regardless of how long it took. Over the next 5 days, I experimented with different styles and techniques, learning as much as I could from each experience. Instead of seeing the hair as individual strands, I would see them as one big shape. Using this approach made drawing hair much more easier. But what wasn't easy was that I kept stepping out of my comfort zone. For day 13, I tried painting it in a style that was very different to what I would usually make. I clearly didn't know my fundamentals because look at how much I struggled with these eyes. I experimented with different brushes and I used liquify to my advantage. The person I'm painting here was a friend of a friend, so the pressure was on. I wanted this one to be perfect, so I stylized it as best as I could. Time flew by and I was finally finished. Whoa. I spent a whopping 7.5 hours on this painting, but most of the time was probably looking at the screen, mustering up the strength to make the next brushstroke. Day 15 proved difficult as I faced an art block. I searched for inspiration and tried various references, but nothing worked. Maybe I pushed myself too hard, so I decided to skip a day, which turned into 2, then 3. I felt like I was relating my art with long and tedious hours of suffering, so I decided to apply a time limit again, eventually drawing this reference. I had a lot of fun and I felt improvement in my color picking. I started appreciating colors a lot more in day 16. I was in that natural phase of abusing saturation. I exaggerated them in focal points, bumping up that saturation meter to the max. And at this point, I could smell the colors. I also started to get the hang of the facial structure and how to make the face look good. I felt more confident in my hair rendering skill, keeping it simple and using big brush strokes to create the illusion of detail. I could feel the improvement with each portrait. My brain was basically pumping with new knowledge. I tried going as fast as I could for day 18. I rendered the entire thing in 1 hour and 20 minutes. I broke my wrists with how fast I painted this one. At this point, I felt like I mastered rendering until I forgot the hands. It's alright though, because we need to keep powering through this challenge and get 30 of them done. Each portrait was very different, and this one was definitely the most colorful one. Painting eyes were still really hard for me, but I really liked how the hands turned out in this one. Just one of them.